Hello, this is Zahirul Alam. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. Our guest today is Mr. Mark Lowcock. He is one of the top 5 executives of the DFID Management Board. The Department of International Development, that is called DFID, is the British government department responsible for promoting development and the reduction of poverty. Mr. Mark Lowcock was appointed Director General Country Programs in April 2008, and he is responsible for DFID's programs in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Latin America. He is, this is his, I think, the 4th visit in Bangladesh. And welcome, Mr. Mark Lowcock, on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you very much.
Mark, I know that you are responsible for many important parts of the globe for the development assistance from DFID's part. And in Bangladesh, this time you met with the ministers, government officials, and discussed the your forthcoming or your coming programs, and you learned about the new government's challenges and their programs for the coming days. So what impressions you have got so far from the new government's policy and their programs?
Well, first of all, I've congratulated everybody I've met in the country, government and others, on the terrific achievement of the elections on 29 December. It was a very inspiring sight, actually, to see the pictures of 82 million of your citizens, 41 million men and even more women, go to the ballot box and to express the choice they made on the future of the country. And for the elections to be held in a way which everybody internationally was impressed by, I think, is a terrific credit to the country, particularly because of the difficulties of the recent past. Yeah. The government was elected on an ambitious manifesto to promote economic development and reduce poverty. Okay. I've had a lot of good discussions with government ministers and others, and I've seen for myself some of the programs that have already been going on and which can continue. I think the international community has a lot of sympathy for the priorities the government has set out: poverty reduction, education, health. Okay. In particular, also trying to provide better lives for women and girls in Bangladesh. The UK currently, last year, provided about 10 billion taka in development assistance to Bangladesh. Okay. The British government has already announced that we expect our assistance to increase by 2010-11, our financial year, to about 15 billion taka.
Okay.
Taka, which is about 150 million pounds on current exchange rates.
150 million pounds?
Yes.
For 2010? For
2010.
But currently your assistance figure is 110 or 117?
Million pounds, that's right. Okay. So there's an increase, a significant increase. And over the last 3 years, we have helped 4 million people in this country get access to safe water and sanitation. Okay. 4.5 million girls and boys go to school for the first time. To provide health services for more than 14 million people in urban areas, and also to deal with some of the natural disasters in the country. After Cyclone Sidra, we were able to...
But Mark, you, at the very beginning, you mentioned that the present government, they imparted some of their programs that, in your term, is a bit ambitious. And do you think these are achievable within the time frame of this government?
I think that Bangladesh can get a long way to achieving the Millennium Development Goals by 2015.
Yes.
There's been substantial progress on primary education, on infant mortality and maternal mortality. I think that in many of the goals, the whole NDG framework can be achieved. I guess the one that is most off track at the moment is the maternal mortality goal. The level of maternal mortality here has fallen from 547 per 100,000 live births to about 320 over the last 15 years or so. But that reduction needs to be accelerated.
Okay.
But if the government uses its resources wisely, if the institutions perform well, and if the international community provides support, I think Bangladesh can be a country which can get very close to the MDGs.
Okay, yeah, and there are, we know that the 8 MDG, I mean the 8 Millennium Development Goal is lie at the heart of the DFID's work, like poverty reduction, eradicate extreme hunger, universal primary education, promote gender equality, as you mentioned already, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, and combat the HIV/AIDS, and other things, and two other things. But you have traveled to visit some of the areas, rural areas in Bangladesh. What is your practical experience? What did you gather from field level? What messages you got from there?
Well, I spent part of yesterday visiting a primary school in the rural areas and talking to young adolescent women about their hopes for the future, visiting clinics, visiting people in their homes, asking about the problems and challenges they faced. And it was very inspiring. One of the things I always like doing when I travel to the countries in which DFID works is visiting schools.
Okay.
And one question I always ask the young people in schools I meet is, what would they like their future to hold?
Okay.
And it was very inspiring listening to your young compatriots.
What did you say?
Well, there were young people who wanted to be doctors and teachers.
And engineers.
And engineers. But there was also a young man, a 10-year-old young man, who told me he wanted to be a politician.
Really?
And what he said was, I've never had this answer before, and I thought it was a great answer. He said, when I asked him, so why do you want to be a politician?
Okay.
He said, I want to help make this country a better place. I want to see poverty reduced here, and I want to make a contribution to that. I've been in other countries, I can tell you, where people say they want to be politicians
Which
for quite other motives.
Okay.
I've had a completely different answer to that question, for example, in some African countries. But the message I take away is that the young people and everyone else I've met here has aspirations for the future and ambitions for the country. And as I say, I've seen programs that, if they're delivered well, can make a big contribution to those aspirations. There are lots of problems as well.
But, okay, yeah, please continue.
So, you know, I think that corruption has been a significant problem. Better use of financial resources is something that needs to be addressed. I think there are still very significant gender inequality issues here. I visited today the Acid Survivors Foundation and talked to women who had been subject to the most appalling violent attacks, and the foundation is helping them recover and rehabilitate their lives, but is also campaigning to reduce this appalling form of violence. And I was encouraged, I must say, by the reduction in that kind of attack that's happened over recent years. And that gives me confidence that if Bangladesh wants to, if there's a will at the political level, if all the institutions work together, a lot of progress can be made on gender equality.
Do you see the real political will is there for confronting those challenges right now?
The test of that will be in what the new government actually deliver. But their manifesto is clear, and what I've been struck by is the evident commitment of the people I've met over the last few days actually to delivering that manifesto.
But do you think the government and the policymakers at every level always try to explain that with the limited resources, all the challenges cannot be dealt with in the same degree of efficiency? So do you think that Bangladesh will face resource problem in implementing the big policies or ambitious policies in different socio-economic sectors?
Resources in every country are always limited, and any government, however rich, has to make sure it gets the best value for money from its resources. I think the new government will have to make some choices, but the things that I have heard them say they're prioritising, basic education, health services, economic growth, dealing with the food price issue by increasing food production and making it more easily available, those seem to me to be priorities which respond to what I've heard the citizens of the country in the little time I've been here say are their main desires.
Okay. I remember, Mark, that one of your minister, the defeat minister, possibly Douglas Alexander, he said that when he was visiting at the time of Cyclone Cedar, he said the UK is committed supporting the people of Bangladesh, not only to cope with the severe impact of cyclone and flooding, but also to tackle poverty and unlock Bangladesh's economic potential. how would you unlock the economic potential? How do you plan at the DFID level?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say on that is that actually over the last 10 years or so, a little bit longer, Bangladesh has a very creditable record of economic growth and of poverty reduction. If you take the way the poverty headcount has reduced 2% a year for the last 5 years or more, that compares with the very best performance of any country in reducing its poverty headcount, whether it's China or Vietnam or Uganda. So there's success to build on. Bangladesh is a country where most of the resources are human resources.
Yes.
Compared to other countries, you do not have a lot of natural resources.
Right.
So the future here is about investing in the people of the country, building skills, developing further the industries which you have developed very successfully. I think the garments industry here has grown very well, is a massive source of employment, and I think that Bangladesh in some ways has knocked some of the other competitors out of that industry, and there's scope to build it further and also to broaden into higher value commodities as well. But I think the fundamental development path for Bangladesh is around human capital.
Human capital, so health and education is important. We're talking about how Bangladesh government and the new government can better deal with the challenges they outlined in their manifestos and their actions for the coming days. My question is to you that you were mentioning before that about the confronting the menace of corruption. You know, the developing countries, still in Bangladesh also, we have been facing rampant corruption, pervasive corruption, menacing problem. It's not the only problem in Bangladesh, it's around the globe. So is there any common formula? Is there any common ideology, international fight against corruption? How do you look at these problems, at these core problems?
I think the first thing I would say is that many countries during the course of their development have had to deal with corruption and the misuse of public office.
Yeah.
And if I go back into the deep history of the United Kingdom, that was true at some points in our past as well. If you look at the countries that have dealt with this problem effectively, there are a number of ingredients or a number of features that they have in common. The first and most important thing is political leadership. If from the very top there's a clear determination to deal with corruption, then that can set the framework for lots of other things. The second thing in some countries is to improve the legislative framework. The third thing often is to deal with public financial management to improve the quality of auditing, accounting and so on. The other thing it's important to... Sorry.
Okay. No, you mentioned that about the public financial management. Do you think that the parliamentary supervision, I mean the parliamentary oversight is very crucial on public financial management in Bangladesh?
I think that's important in every country, and I can tell you in one of my responsibilities from time to time, I'm called to Parliament in the United Kingdom to account for how DFID spends its budget, and sometimes I go to the Public Accounts Committee and I'm asked very direct questions so that the parliamentarians can satisfy themselves that we get good value for money and money spent on the things that it's supposed to be spent on. And that parliamentary oversight, together with the role that the Controller and Auditor General and the National Audit Office play, a very important part of the framework for checks and balances. The media play a role as well. The justice sector plays a role. And citizens of the country play a role. You know, in the UK and in other countries, can be true in Bangladesh as well. Someone who is asked to pay a bribe for something or see some inappropriate behaviour has an opportunity to blow the whistle. And that is another one of the ways in which countries deal with these problems.
But whistleblowers are always not comfortable.
It's not always easy to be a whistleblower, and the whistleblowers need to be supported and valued and
with
helped.
legislation.
In some places, yes, sometimes legislation is necessary.
Yeah, but in our country, I think the whistleblowers not always safe, because if they blow their whistle, then they must face the dire consequences from the administrative sides or the policymakers or the ruling parties. So it's very difficult for them to blow whistle always.
Well, that's where I think the issue of political leadership and the role of the justice system and the broad level of commitment that there is across society to dealing with the problem is important.
Okay, and another thing is you always, every people, particularly in Bangladesh, in 2007, the worst affected Bangladesh for the Cyclone Sidr. In the wake of Cyclone Sidr, international community stood by Bangladesh. They extended their helping hand, and DFID as well. No doubt about that. But what DFID is planning for doing something for the countries like Bangladesh to face properly or efficiently the adverse effect of climatic change? What are you doing in this sector?
Well, in September last year, we hosted a conference in London on climate change, and the then finance advisor and various other members of the caretaker government came to...
You were there?
I was there.
Okay.
We had very good discussions, and what Britain has done as part of the follow-up to that is allocate £75 million to begin to help Bangladesh deal with these problems. Bangladesh is not a country which has contributed to climate change,
and we are the worst sufferer,
and will potentially be a significant victim. And I think there's an international responsibility as well as a national one to help make sure that this is a challenge that's dealt with effectively here.
Is it mere rhetoric, or really the international community? I don't doubt your sincerity or your assistance from the DFID's part, but as a whole, the international community in a right position or in a right mood to really consider this problem, the consequences for the people, 150 million people in Bangladesh? Really, they are in a mood to assist us?
I think there's, on climate change particularly, there's two dimensions to that. Firstly, there's the dimension about what the world decides to do in Copenhagen at the big climate change conference at the end of the year.
End of this year.
End of this year, to reduce CO2 levels. Okay. And the second then is how we help countries adapt. And I have been involved in a lot of discussions over the last 2 years to generate more international resources to help countries deal with the challenge of climate change. So, for example, the British government, with one or two others, proposed 18 months ago the establishment of a new international fund to help bring new technology and other means of dealing with climate change. And by the end of last year, $6 billion had been raised for that fund, including about $2 billion from the UK. And I think that's just a signal that there is international commitment to dealing with the challenge. But I think there's a long way to go. Okay. The Copenhagen conference will be very important, and everyone will have to play their part.
In a figure, I found that the total UK aid in 2007 and 2008 now totals almost 117 million pounds. 117 million pounds. And you said that by 2010 it will be 120 million pounds. But the economic recession is looming large, and the United Kingdom's economy is also under pressure. So do you think this amount is a significant increase in the wake of the economic recession?
We will increase...
120 by 2010.
Well, it'll be 150.
150?
Yes.
So do you think this is a significant increase as a development assistance from DFID part?
Well, I think from 114 to 150 in 2 years is a significant increase. Okay. And the important thing is, and you're right to say that the UK is one of the countries affected by the current economic recession, but the British government has a commitment to reach the 0.7% UN target for development assistance. The opposition parties in the UK have also said that they will give priority to international development, and I'm sure that because of the groundswell of support in the UK, we will stand up to the commitments we've made internationally.
Okay, Mr. Mark, we are almost at the end of our program. So after visiting Bangladesh this time under new government, new leadership, new thoughts, new ideas in different sectors, including poverty reduction and other areas. So how hopeful you are that Bangladesh is in the right position to change in the challenging and the developmental issues?
Well, I've been to this wonderful country a number of times before, as you said, and I must say the mood of optimism that there is at the moment is quite different to my last experience here in 2005. How this country develops ultimately depends above all on the government and people of the country. I do think there's a good chance now. The external environment is a little bit difficult. Bangladesh is not as exposed as some other countries. Your economy so far is coping quite well, but there will be challenges.
No apprehension of slowing down the economic growth rate?
Well, the forecasts for Bangladesh are for a lower level of slowdown than in many other countries. And I think we'll have to see what happens over the next months and so on. But I think the prospects are good. And if you take a 3 to 5 year horizon in particular, as I said earlier, I think Bangladesh is a country that can get very, very close to the MDGs.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Mark Lowcock, for joining us on Frankly Speaking.
Thank
you so much. Dear viewers, we are in a process of change, and our new government has promised so. DFID, which Mr. Mark represents, estimates that its aid lifts 3 million people permanently out of poverty every year around the world. We expect that DFID will generously extend its hand for Bangladesh, and it has what it has been doing for a long time. I believe that with the help of our development partners, we will be able to expedite our fight against poverty and confront other developmental challenges. I'm sure that our concerted efforts will be translated into sustainable development, and Bangladesh will become a middle-income country. And that's it for today. We welcome you to watch our next episode on Frankly Speaking. Till then, bye-bye.